They never told you the truth about money. Not your schools, not your culture, not even your religious institutions. Because the truth is dangerous to a world that profits off your ignorance. They hid this one secret: wealth is not created. It is revealed when your soul wakes up. You see, what keeps you broke is not just a lack of money, it's a lack of alignment. You've been running the race, but in the wrong stadium. You've been planting seeds, but in poisoned soil. They gave you dreams, then sold you distractions. And now you blame yourself for the harvest that never came. Let's begin here. You were not born broke. You were born blindfolded. They handed you a script. It said, go to school, get a job, follow the rules. Don't ask too many questions. But the script wasn't written by the wise, it was written by the wealthy to keep you manageable. They taught you to fear money, to associate it with greed, to pretend virtue looks like struggle. So you dress up in lack and call it humility, but real humility is not thinking less of yourself as self-rightly as think for self-purpose. They told you your value is based on output. But the kingdom whispers your value was written in eternal ink long before you lifted a finger. When you believe that, money stops being a master and starts being a tool to serve, build, bless, and elevate. And here's the twist: they never taught you how to handle wealth, because if you knew, you'd stop begging from a table that you were always meant to own. They taught you consumption, not creation. They gave you endless choices, but no vision. And now you suffer not from lack, but from noise. You scroll, you compare, you panic, you buy, you repeat. You think you're poor because you don't have enough, but you've just been trained to never be full. Insatiable appetite is the fuel of a broken economy. But here's the secret they never wanted you to discover. Wealth begins when you reclaim your authority. When you see money not as a goal, but as a result of wisdom, discipline, clarity, and courage. The moment you stop asking, how can I get more, and start asking, what have I been entrusted with? Everything changes. It doesn't start with a business plan. It starts with a mindset shift. From being a slave to being a steward, from begging to building, from reacting to reigning. You were never supposed to chase money. You were designed to attract it through obedience to your calling, excellence in your craft, and purity in your motives. So, no, you're not still broke because you're lazy. You're still broke because they hid this truth from you. Wealth isn't about getting more. It's about becoming more. Wake up. They can't enslave someone who knows their worth. The truest poverty does not begin in the pocket, but in the perception. Long before a man lacks bread, he lacks vision. Long before he is bankrupt in finances, he is impoverished in thought. What we carry in our minds, our beliefs, assumptions, fears, and philosophies shapes the entire architecture of our external lives. The walls of financial lack are often built with the bricks of mental deception. We have been taught to measure wealth by currency, and so we ignore the deeper famine, the one that eats away at our courage, our clarity, our conviction. When the soul forgets its worth, the world will not hesitate to give it a discounted label. And so it begins not with a lost job or an empty wallet, but with a small, subtle voice whispering, "You are not enough." This voice is ancient. It is not born of circumstance, but of captivity. Captivity of the intellect, where self-doubt is king, and fear is a trusted advisor. It is there that poverty takes root, not in the economy, not in the government, not even in your employer, but in your agreement with that voice. The man who believes he is poor, who walks through life with a bowed head and a clenched fist, is already defeated, even if he wins the lottery. Because even with riches in hand, he will mismanage, mistrust, and mishandle. He will sabotage his own prosperity because his identity was never rebuilt. He still thinks like a beggar. He still sees money as a god or a threat, never a tool. But the man who trains his mind, who renews his inner world, who confronts every lie he's been sold about scarcity, inadequacy, and fear, he is already rich, even before the first coin touches his palm, because his soul has expanded to hold more. His thinking has stretched to accommodate blessing. He no longer fears money nor chases it with desperation. He walks in dignity, not desperation. How many people live in mental cages, watching others rise and wondering why they remain grounded? They blame systems, and often with justification. But systems can only imprison those who do not know the way out. The bars are made of belief. That is why the deepest work you will ever do is not in your career, but in your mind. Your mindset is the soil. Everything else is fruit. You've likely seen it. Two individuals born in the same place with the same limitations, one flourishes while the other remains stuck. The difference is not talent, not even effort, it is mental wealth. One believed in the possibility of change, the other married the idea that this was just how life is. And so it was for both of them. There is a terrifying comfort in being a victim. It asks nothing of you but your anger. But mental wealth asks everything of you, your old beliefs, your inherited fears, your conditioned habits. It demands that you trade your excuses for responsibility, your hopelessness for vision, and your pain for purpose. Poverty of the mind tells you that the world owes you something, that you must wait for the right connection, the right job, the right miracle. But those walking in mental abundance realize they are the miracle. They are the agent, not the audience. The author, not the footnote. No amount of external wealth can replace the deep security of an aligned mind. A man can lose his fortune and rebuild it if his mind is sound. But give a broken mind a fortune, and it will find a way to lose it. This is why so many who win wealth quickly through inheritance or sudden fame find themselves emptier than before. Their external gain only magnified their internal deficit. Mental wealth is not arrogance. It is clarity. It is the ability to see the world rightly, to name truth when others are selling illusions. It is the refusal to bow to fear or scarcity. It is the training of thought, the discipline of focus, and the courage to hold fast to a higher vision when everything around you preaches limitation. They may hand you broken tools. They may mock your dreams. They may tell you that you come from nothing, that you will return to nothing. But if your mind is rich in wisdom, identity, and purpose, there is no power on earth that can keep you poor. Because you do not need a perfect economy to prosper. You need a mind that knows the truth and the strength to live it. The world does not wait for you to find your purpose. It doesn't even encourage you to search for it. No, the world, in all its noise and speed, assigns you an identity long before you are old enough to question it. And in doing so, it performs a kind of theft, quiet, systematic, and accepted. It markets who you are before you ever discover why you are. And the moment you accept the version of you that the world sells, you begin the long, slow forgetting of your real calling. From our earliest days, identity is given to us like a costume, stitched together by culture, family expectations, algorithms, and trend. We are taught to perform before we understand, taught to answer the question, what do you want to be? With careers, achievements, and aesthetics, not with purpose, values, or soul. The world is fast to define you because a person with no self-knowledge is easy to sell to, easy to saltate. Before you ask, what am I made for, you are handed a mirror not to see yourself, but to study what others will see when they look at you. Image becomes the priority. Style becomes substance. Perception replaces presence. So you grow up learning how to be seen, not how to see. Your talents become commodities. Your story becomes a brand. Your difference, once sacred, is now filtered and curated for applause. This is no accident. The world is built to monetize confusion. It profits when you search for yourself in shop windows and social feeds. It sells you new selves every season. Be thinner, be louder, be richer, be less, but never be whole. Never be anchored, never be still long enough to hear the whisper of the soul over the roar of the market. Because if you did, if you remembered that your worth was set before time began, you'd stop buying what they're selling. You would stop defining yourself by jobs you hate, people who left, or numbers that rise and fall. You would stop giving away your attention like a currency with no limit. You would start to notice how everything around you trains you to forget who you are, every ad, every comparison, every loud opinion. And once you wake up to that, you are dangerous to the system because you cannot control someone who knows who they are. This identity they sell is not neutral. It comes with weight, with obligations. It tells you who to impress, what success must look like, what failure should shame you, and what dreams are too much. It rewards compliance. It punishes authenticity. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your soul begins to shrink to fit inside the costume it was never made for. You walk through life performing a character while the real self aches inside, forgotten, buried, and doubted. The tragedy is that purpose cannot bloom in soil poisoned by false identity. Your calling will not shout over your pretending. Purpose is allergic to pretense. It demands truth. But the world gives you masks, not mirrors. And so you wander not because you lack a path, but because the one walking it is not really you. And the more you identify with what the world gave you, the more fragile your identity becomes. Because anything the world gives, it can take. Fame can vanish. Applause can fade. Beauty will wrinkle. Trends will change. If your sense of self is tied to these things, you will always be rebuilding your house on sinking sand. But when your identity is rooted in your origin, not your opinions, not your mistakes, not your social rank, then purpose finds fertile ground. Purpose cannot grow in a soul obsessed with performance. It does not survive in competition. It flourishes in authenticity, in quiet courage, in knowing that you were made for more than what they market. You were not designed to blend in, but to bear weight, to stand firm, to reflect something eternal in a world obsessed with the temporary. Yet most walk through life exhausted, not from chasing purpose, but from performing identity. Their souls ache from the burden of keeping up with what they were never meant to be. And they wonder why clarity never comes, why meaning always escapes them. It is because you cannot discover your why while wearing someone else's who. Desire in its purest form is not the enemy. It is not a flaw, nor a stain, nor a signal of sin. Desire is the pulse of the soul. It is the inner ache that reminds us we were made for more than what we see. The world may teach us to suppress it or overindulge it, but neither response leads to peace. Suppression breeds numbness, indulgence breeds chaos. The truth lies in neither extreme, it lies in direction. Desire without direction becomes destructive. Like a river with no banks, it floods the fields it was meant to nourish. It soaks everything, confuses everything, erodes the foundations of even the most noble pursuits. But when desire is directed, when it is tied to meaning, anchored in wisdom, and submitted to truth, it becomes power. Not reckless power, but righteous power. Not hunger for control, but hunger for calling. We often fear desire because we have seen what it does when left untamed. It consumes. It addicts, it ruins, it promises fulfillment and leaves emptiness. So we recoil, we teach ourselves to be content with a safe, colorless life. We try to kill desire altogether, mistaking restraint for holiness. But holiness is not the absence of desire. It is the alignment of desire with divine purpose. The desire to be seen, to be loved, to succeed, to create, to belong. These are not sins. They are signals. They are echoes of Eden in a fallen world. They are the soul remembering what wholeness feels like and longing to return. But when these signals are misinterpreted, when they are chased blindly or answered with counterfeit pleasures, they distort. Desire, once beautiful, becomes burdensome. The soul begins to reach for things it cannot hold, thirsting at poisoned wells, feasting on illusions. Desire turns sinful not when it is strong, but when it is aimless. When we want deeply but do not know what we truly want, we become vulnerable to every voice, every offer, every temptation. We begin to mistake stimulation for satisfaction. We become busy without becoming full. We consume endlessly, yet we remain starved. The modern world is perfectly designed to exploit directionless desire. It markets indulgence as freedom and hunger as identity. It teaches us to define ourselves by what we crave, not by what we choose. And so we are constantly reaching but never resting, grasping but never grounded. Our hearts become restless not because they desire too much, but because they are pointed toward too little. The irony is that desire was meant to lead us to God, not away from Him. The longing we feel was always supposed to be a compass. The ache was meant to point us toward the eternal, not trap us in the temporal. But we have forgotten how to read our own desires. We treat them like either gods to be obeyed or enemies to be destroyed. They are neither. They are messengers, they are mirrors, they are maps. The soul that has learned to question its desires without silencing them is rare and wise. It asks not just what do I want, but why do I want it? And where will this want lead me? It discerns, it sifts, it directs. And in doing so, it does not become less passionate, it becomes more powerful. Because now desire is not dragging the soul into confusion, it is drawing it toward destiny. There is no great calling without great desire. Purpose is not birthed from apathy. Vision is not born in those who have killed their longings. No, it is those who desire rightly who have harnessed the storm within that build things that last. It is those who have endured the battle between flesh and spirit, between impulse and intention, and emerged with clarity who truly live. When desire is ruled by impulse, it enslaves, but when it is ruled by insight, it liberates. And that is the transformation we must. Seek not the erasure of desire, but the redemption of it, not emptiness, but aim, not silence, but song. Because desire was never the disease. It was always the symptom of a soul that remembers heaven in a world that keeps offering earth. There is a kind of humility that heaven recognizes, a quiet strength that bows not from fear, but from reverence. It is the humility of a soul that knows its place, not in terms of worthlessness, but in terms of wonder. This is true humility, not thinking less of oneself, but thinking of oneself rightly. But what we see so often is not this kind of humility. It is a counterfeit, a posture that appears meek but is rooted in pride. And it is far more dangerous because it wears the mask of virtue. False humility is not humility at all. It is pride disguised in the language of modesty. It looks like deflection, like self-dismissal. Seek not the erasure of desire, but the redemption of it, not emptiness, but aim, not silence, but song. Because desire was never the disease. It was always the symptom of a soul that remembers heaven in a world that keeps offering earth. There is a kind of humility that heaven recognizes, a quiet strength that bows not from fear, but from reverence. It is the humility of a soul that knows its place, not in terms of worthlessness, but in terms of wonder. This is true humility, not thinking less of oneself, but thinking of oneself rightly. But what we see so often is not this kind of humility. It is a counterfeit, a posture that appears meek but is rooted in pride. And it is far more dangerous because it wears the mask of virtue. False humility is not humility at all. It is pride disguised in the language of modesty. It looks like deflection, like self-dismissal, like shrinking away from praise or opportunity. But beneath the surface, it is still concerned with the self, still absorbed in image, still desperate to manage perception. Pride does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers, "I'm not worthy," hoping someone will disagree. Where pride says, "I'm better than everyone," false humility says, "I'm worse than everyone," but both are obsessed with self. Both place the individual at the center of the thought. Both are unable to forget themselves long enough to be truly free. True humility forgets self, not out of neglect, but out of freedom. It does not cling to unworthiness, nor does it inflate importance. It simply sees clearly and serves boldly. We live in a culture where image is curated and comparison is constant. In such a climate, false humility thrives. It pretends to hide, but it longs to be found. It says, "I'm nothing," but waits for applause for its authenticity. It uses weakness as a brand, turning brokenness into a badge. It will even reject compliments, not out of sincerity, but out of a desire to appear spiritual. It confuses avoidance with holiness, but false humility, for all its softness, is still pride. It still clings to the fear of being seen as arrogant. It still fears being judged, being disliked, being misunderstood. And so it hides not to become less, but to protect what little it still believes it has. It does not trust grace. It does not trust that worth is given, not earned. And because it fears judgment, it cannot walk confidently, even when called. How many people have hidden their gifts beneath false humility, calling it surrender? How many have silenced their voices, not because they were asked to, but because they feared being seen as proud? How many have refused to lead, speak, create, or pursue, all while saying, "I'm just staying humble"? But this is not humility, it is fear wearing a mask. It is self-preservation disguised as piety. God is not honored when we pretend to be smaller than we are, nor is he impressed when we deny the gifts he has entrusted to us. True humility does not bury the talent, it multiplies it. It does not walk in the shadow of others out of fear, it walks in light and invites others into it. False humility keeps others comfortable. True humility sets others free. We must learn to recognize the inner dialogue that sounds holy but smells of pride. The voice that says, "Don't speak up, they'll think you're arrogant." The voice that says, "Don't apply, you're not worthy." The voice that says, "Don't try, you'll look like a fraud." These are not the voices of humility. They are the voices of shame, shame wrapped in the language of virtue. It takes courage to walk in true humility, to own your calling without apology, to accept your limitations without despair, to be grateful for your gifts without boasting, to stand in your identity without shrinking or swelling. It takes courage to say, "This is who I am," and mean it not as a declaration of superiority, but as a quiet agreement with truth. True humility liberates. It lets you speak without needing applause. It lets you serve without seeking reward. It lets you shine without needing credit. It is not concerned with being noticed or being invisible. It is concerned with being faithful. It does not compare. It does not compete. It simply is. False humility is a heavy burden. It keeps you small so you won't offend. It keeps you quiet so you won't be misjudged. It keeps you apologetic for the very light you were meant to bear, but that light was never yours to hoard or to hide. It was given, and what is given must be given again. Not with arrogance, not with fear, but with the open hands of true humility. There is a quiet lie that has worked its way into the heart of man, a lie so subtle that it dresses itself in the language of ambition and achievement. It says, "This is mine." It whispers, "You built this, you earned this, you deserve this." And once that seed takes root, it reshapes the way we live, the way we love, the way we give. It convinces us that we are owners in a world where we were only ever meant to be stewards. Ownership appeals to the ego. It offers a sense of control, permanence, and pride. It suggests that we can possess the gifts of this life as if they were the work of our own hands and not borrowed grace. It makes us believe that our time is ours to spend, our money ours to keep, our bodies ours to use however we please. But the truth is sobering and freeing. Nothing is truly ours. We are born into a world we did not create, breathing air we did not design, walking on land shaped long before we arrived. Every gift, from the strength in our limbs to the thoughts in our mind, has been entrusted, not granted as property. The role of the steward, not the owner, is what we were always made for, and the sooner we learn to hold with open hands what the world clutches in fists, the freer we become. Stewardship is not the rejection of responsibility, it is the elevation of it. It understands that to be entrusted with something is far more sacred than to claim its own. The steward does not possess, but protects. He does not hoard, but harnesses. He does not say, "This is mine," but "This is mine, but has been given to me for a time, and I must be faithful with it." That kind of thinking changes everything. When you believe you own your money, you spend it to satisfy yourself. But when you see yourself as a steward of it, you spend it with eternity in mind. When you believe you own your talent, you seek applause. But when you steward your gifts, you seek impact. When you think you own your body, you serve pleasure. But when you steward it, you serve purpose. Stewardship shifts the center. It dethrones the self. The steward is not less powerful than the owner, he is more responsible. The owner asks, what do I want? The steward asks, what is required of me? This question is heavier, more demanding. It doesn't allow for indifference. It calls for wisdom, restraint, and courage. But it also protects the soul from pride, from fear, and from the crushing weight of pretending we are gods in charge of our own little kingdoms. The tragedy of false ownership is that it breeds anxiety. If it's truly yours, then it's yours to protect at all costs. You must fear its loss. You must fight to keep it. But the steward knows peace, even in loss, because nothing was ever truly his to begin with. He holds loosely, but not carelessly. He values deeply, but not possessively. He knows that everything entrusted to him is for a season and a purpose, and both will pass. Modern culture does not celebrate stewardship. It celebrates accumulation. It equates success with how much you can keep, how much you can name as your own. But heaven measures differently. Heaven watches how we handle what we've been given, not how loudly we boast about having it. It is less impressed by our declarations of ownership and more concerned with our obedience in management. Stewardship begins with gratitude. The man who sees all as gift is the man who does not take lightly the responsibility to use it well. He is not entitled, he is entrusted, and that changes his posture toward everything. He asks not, do I have enough, but am I being faithful with what I have? He does not demand more, he becomes more. This is true wealth, not the abundance of possessions, but the abundance of purpose in how those possessions are used. It is not about what we gather, but what we give, not about what we claim, but how we care. It is found in the quiet, daily choices to serve something beyond self, to live as one who answers to a higher authority, and to remember that one day all must be given back. You were born into a battle, though no one told you so. Not a battle of flesh and blood, but of spirit and soul, of truth and illusion. The moment you began to hope, to dream, to live with purpose, the giants awoke. They are not always loud or obvious. Sometimes they come dressed as discouragement, sometimes as distraction, sometimes as delay. But they come. And what's worse, you were not handed weapons fit for the war, you were given broken swords. From the moment you could think, the world began shaping your armor, but instead of steel, it gave you noise. Instead of clarity, confusion. Instead of a sword of truth, it handed you the dull blade of self-doubt, comparison, and fear. You learned to fight your battles with hollow words and tired habits, and when you fell, they told you it was your fault. That you were not strong enough, disciplined enough, brave enough, but no one questioned the tools. You've been swinging at giants with swords that never stood a chance. You've tried to cut through addiction with willpower alone. You've tried to overcome anxiety with productivity. You've tried to fight insecurity with affirmation and failure with applause. And for a moment it seems to work. The giant steps back. But it never falls. Because broken swords don't kill giants, they only make you tired. The truth is, you were never meant to fight this war with the world's weapons. You were never meant to rely on your own strength, your own logic, your own image. These are poor defenses against enemies as ancient and cunning as fear, shame, and despair. Giants do not flinch when you quote empty mantras. They do not fall when you posture and pretend. They fall only when confronted with something true, something whole, something forged in fire and not fashion. Look around how many are weary, not because the giants are stronger, but because they've been using weapons that do not cut. They're exhausted, not from the fight itself, but from swinging its shadows with blades that were never meant to bear weight. They sharpen their broken swords over and over, hoping for different results. They double their effort, but not their wisdom. And they wonder why nothing changes. This is how the world teaches us to fight on the surface. Focus on outcomes, focus on speed, focus on looking like a warrior, even if your soul is collapsing under the armor. It teaches us to cope, not to conquer, to numb the pain, not to understand it, to fight louder, not wiser. But the giants are not fooled by noise. They are only moved by what is real. To fight well, you must first admit the truth that you are not winning, that your sword is cracked, that the techniques you've been using are clever but ineffective. There is no shame in the confession, only in pretending. Because once you acknowledge the brokenness, you are finally ready to trade it for something better, for something whole, for something tested and true. True weapons are not glamorous. They are not always praised. They are forged in silence through discipline, prayer, honesty, sacrifice. They are born when the soul stops chasing applause and starts seeking truth. The sword that slays giants is not made of steel, but of surrender. It is shaped not in the marketplace, but in the secret place. It is gripped not by pride, but by the hand that has let go of everything else. You must stop expecting results from tools that were never meant to build anything eternal. Stop asking broken swords to do what only truth can do. Your battles are not small, but neither are you. And the moment you pick up the right sword, the one forged in wisdom, tempered in patience, and sharpened by love, you will find that the giants are not immortal. They only appeared so because you were using the wrong weapons. Your healing is not in trying harder, but in learning deeper. Not in fighting with more noise, but in wielding more truth. You are not weak, you are just armed with fragments. The enemy is not invincible, you have just been striking with splinters. When the sword is whole, even the oldest giants begin to tremble.